Hey everyone, and welcome back to another cool video, cool astrology video at Haunted Cerebral. So I'm just going to try and get into it this week, but I just want to say thanks everyone for your continued support, liking, commenting, subscribing to my channels. If you want to know more about what I'm doing, please check the links down below. I've been doing daily videos on TikTok, and I'm trying to do more posts on Instagram as well, but let's see. At the moment, I'm mostly focusing on video stuff. So, but yeah, if you want to show some support, all the info's in the description box. So thanks as always for being there. So let's just kind of get into this week. I'll try not to waste too much time. All right, let's see. All right, so this is the situation for this week. These are the transits for this week. There's a lot of lunar stuff going on this week, but some of the main things happening are the shifts into Taurus and some of the reactivation of the Aquarius Taurus tensions, the square between Saturn and Uranus. So let me just bring that on to the, just going to move that to here. Okay. So I'm going to do things a little bit differently this week. I'm not going to use the ascendant. So we'll do it with a 0 Aries chart, which basically just means that you can kind of use this from anywhere and it won't be house specific, but the timings of things will be from Berlin, Germany. So if you want to know the exact timings for aspects, when they go exact and everything, just change the location to wherever you are, and that will update the timing. All right, so this week starts off for us in Germany with the Mercury Sun Cazimi. It's happening. It's pretty interesting, Cazimi. And if you don't know what a Cazimi is, I explain it in some of my videos, but essentially it's whenever a planet does an exact degree conjunction with the sun, and it's said that the planet becomes kind of enthroned in the kind of furnace heart of the sun. They sit. It's almost because the sun represents kings, and whenever a planet goes Cazimi, forms Cazimi with the sun, it's like that planet for that moment sits in the seat of the king, and it kind of emphasizes the significations of that particular sign that it's in. And right now the sun is exalted. Now this happens here in Germany quite early in the morning. It happens at 3 in the morning. So we may wake up with this new state of mind. Maybe our dreams, if we had any, would have been quite articulated and really kind of like figuring out what was going on even last year as well. Like there'll be a lot of more clear picture of how we want to do things, how we want to initiate things, how we want to start things, and how we want to kind of move into new territories and take action. So the reason why I say this is probably related somehow to last year is because this Cazimi happens. Excuse me. This Cazimi happens right at the exact degree of where Mars stationed retrograde last year. So it's not really clear what that means, but I think what I think it means is that, you know, whatever that whole process was of last year while Mars was retrograde in Aries for 6 months, we're starting to really understand what that was, and we're starting to understand some of the tools that we're using and how they can be really specific into the functions that we're using them for. Maybe in terms of wherever you're going to have Aries in your chart and how that's going to be manifesting for you in your life. So It may be that, you know, you're kind of figuring out what sort of things are working in what situations, and where you're kind of like able to figure those things out and use them articulatedly. So it's kind of like seeing, you know, how you know, sword, like if you think of a sword, you know, I'm just using that as an example because Aries is a Mars ruled sign, so there's something to do with weaponry on some level. So if you think of a sword, it has multiple functions. It's not just a weapon for power and killing, but it also can be sheathed, right? So it's not just about when we use the tools, but also when we don't use it. So, you know, what kind of ways in which we are using the things, the powers we have at the moment, and where they're applicable, rather than just doing it all the time. So there's a bit of like a staying power to that. So I think, you know, we're kind of figuring out what kind of messages are we communicating, and learning to be a bit more flexible, open-minded, and adaptable, and kind of succeeding, figuring out like seeing the successes we can have through using our intuitions, especially because, you know, Mars is in a Gemini ruled sign. So kind of brings up what I was saying last week about that collaborative element between Mercury and Mars. Okay. So that's kind of like the big thing that's opening up this week. And it is a significant part of April, because it's really going to clear the mind. It's going to, and the sun has a purging ability, and often when planets are getting closer to the sun, they're going through a big change, and Mercury is moving into from a morning star into an evening star. So we can see within that, by the morning when everyone's waking up in Germany, all of a sudden our thoughts maybe are more receptive, our minds are a bit more receptive to things around us. We're not just trying to figure all the things out and try to make solutions through maybe the ways we're communicating and exchanging things, but maybe we're kind of like looking at situations a bit differently and allowing them to impress on us, and being a bit more responsive in the way that we meet new challenges and things like that. So it is a pretty big energy shift, and that's going to continue through the day. And then Mercury is actually going to move around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Mercury actually moves into a new sign. So this is a big energy shift in the way we're thinking and the way that we're communicating. This is also going to be happening kind of simultaneously to when the moon makes a trine to Neptune. So we may be having a bit more, we may be a bit getting caught up in the fantasy of things, not really seeing clearly, or maybe our feelings are a bit mixed. Maybe we're a bit idealizing the situation, or there's kind of a rose-colored glasses in terms of whatever's going on in between those Cancer and Pisces areas of life that we have. But like at the same time, there's this big energy shift. And then if we go forward a few hours by the evening, I think, let's see, the sun actually moves into Taurus as well. So now we have an assembly of planets here in Taurus. And, you know, that's going to change the way that we're using our energy and how we're going to be applying our actions to some things in life, these Taurus themes in life. So, you know, where's our power? Where's the simplicity of life? Where's the abundance? Where's the things that we desire, and how are we going to take action to get those? Now, what's interesting too is that actually, even though the sun and Mercury moved into they had the cazimi in the beginning of the day, and then they kind of shift when Mercury changed signs, that sign boundary kind of separated them all of a sudden. But then the sun moves into Taurus as well and continues that cazimi. So now it went from, you know, what was the sun exuding through Mercury in that Aries sort of way. So it's bringing up all those Aries significations, those Mars significations, and, you know, Mars being in Gemini. So it's really like flexible and being more adaptable and kind of trying new things to figure out situations that are not working out. Now it's in a Venus ruled sign. So we're going to be thinking more about what is working, you know, and how what we're saying and focusing on and where that's directed towards more about feeling good, about more sensual things. So getting more steadfast in our ideals, as well as our thoughts and our exchanges in general. So there could be more of a focus on the beauty in our lives that comes from really simple things. Perhaps there's more emphasis on getting out into nature. There's more of an emphasis of connecting with our bodies, connecting with the foods we're eating, connecting with the relationships in our lives. Spending a little bit extra time figuring out what it is exactly that we're wishing for and dreaming about, and then kind of moving towards that. Now, in a slow way. Taurus is a more steadfast sign, but Venus is there. So Venus is co-present. It's also leading the way. It's the planet that's kind of leading the show. But all the planets are kind of getting ready to move into Uranus. So I'll talk about that in a bit. But Uranus kind of brings that unexpected element to the show, that kind of wild card vibe. So yeah, and I think like really what we're going to see once we have this new assembly of planets in Taurus as well is that it really reestablishes the square between Taurus and Aquarius, Uranus and Saturn. So there's this kind of tension that's been building in the world and in our lives. How are we dealing with the struggles of today? There's this definitely over theme in general, maybe in our lives on a personal level, but also on a mundane level, of like slavish compliance versus outright defiance. We can see this in the news every day. What people are willing to do versus what they want to strike against doing. And this is a difficult tension that really the world is dealing with, because on one level, with Uranus being in Taurus, it's like the things that we don't want to get messed up, those things that we want to stay stable, are no longer really like totally trustworthy and stable all the time. It's bringing a new element into it. And then at the same time, Saturn is in rulership. It's in domicile here in Aquarius, and it's an overcoming square to all these planets. So even though there's this move towards, pleasure and the sensuality and our desires of today, it's like we also have to take into account the seriousness of this moment, the seriousness of today, and the seriousness of the world around us, and the outside kind of challenges. And also these overall Aquarian themes of kind of, status quo versus the ideal, and some of the fundamentalism that's kind of being projected out. It's impressing on us, that's impressing on our day-to-day activities, and impressing on our relationships, impressing on our thoughts. And this is like a lot to do with like where maybe the status quo and the world order wants to kind of potentially take things in the future versus like what we're figuring out on a personal level. So this is really kind of like a turning point, and a kind of turning maybe into how we can kind of transform the situation maybe into more of a, rather than it being about like compliance versus defiance, and more about like challenge with accompanied by resilience, and how can we mature our resources in that way. So yeah, I think in general, we're going to be settling into this new normal a bit for the next month while all these planets are in Taurus, and kind of working to establish where we can take necessary steps towards prosperity on a personal level, and hopefully on a world stage as well. Okay, so let's move on to Tuesday. I'm gonna move the chart here. Now, before Tuesday starts, now at the beginning of Tuesday in the morning, basically in the middle of the night, we're gonna get this, here in Germany at least, we're gonna get this exact opposition with Moon and Pluto. Now, thankfully, now that Saturn and Jupiter have left the tropical signs, every time the moon goes through a cardinal sign or a tropical sign, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, there's a bit less pressure and a bit less tension, but it's still going to be hitting that Pluto situation. So there may be a bit of fear in the middle of the night, maybe somewhere in the world where there's still things happening. This could be a moment when our security is picking up on the fear, on the some of the things that are kind of coming to a head right now. Many astrologers are finding that anything dealing with the Pluto transit in Capricorn has to do with the Pluto return to the US's chart. We're seeing a lot of that unfold with the things like the George Floyd case and a lot of the racial tensions building up in the world since the last Pluto return, which was, I think, in the Civil War. So we may be picking up on that. It may also just mean that some people are going to have maybe some nightmares that night. Let's see. So moving forward, Moon moves into Leo, so there's an energy shift. Suddenly we're going to be picking up more on some of these more Leo significations, wanting to be a bit more authoritative, wanting to show what we got, being a bit more, wanting to be a bit more regal on some level, that, that pride situation that's so associated with Leo. Suddenly now we're kind of picking up on that. And yeah, and sort of like, what's the status? What's our status aimed at? And that may be associated with this, but the moon's going to be ruled now by the sun, and it's moving into squares with all those planets that just moved into Taurus. So so that brings up new tensions. It's also activating, again, this kind of the tensions between the fixed signs in general. So yeah, I mean, the moon is really squaring now with all these inferior planets. Pride can get in the way, maybe. And it's kind of like showing us like we can't always get what we want. Maybe there's things where we want to like be the center stage, but it's not really that time for it. So it's not always necessary also in these situations to say something, especially if you don't know what to say. Maybe that, when you find yourselves in those conversations where suddenly you're not the center of attention and you want to be a part of the conversation, and you just say things because maybe that's your way of being included, and somehow it's not really working out. And maybe it's just like not the time to be that person, right? It's not the time to be at the center of stage. So in that kind of perspective, it's not always necessary to say something, especially if we don't know what to say. And I think right now with the moon moving into Leo, it's bringing up a lot of that fixed sign tension that I was talking about earlier in terms of this relationship between Saturn and Uranus. But it's also kind of from a different perspective. And it's kind of like showing us maybe on some level that it's like we're not always the main character of the story of our lives. And whenever I think when the moon's going into Leo for the next transits, we can kind of look at some of the previous transits that the moon made to Leo, and I'll kind of talk a bit more about those in a bit. Stumbling on my own words here, as the moon starts to trine with Neptune. Yeah, I think it's really with the moon in Leo, the moon squaring Taurus, the moon opposite to Aquarius. It's really about life on life's terms at this point. For the next couple of days, it would really benefit us to like really see that not everything's going to go our way. Sometimes it's really not anyone's fault too. It's like things just don't go our way. Maybe maybe a third party is the reason, but we can't point any fingers. We just have to deal with it. So it's a time to practice compassion and patience. Try to use this as an opportunity, as a way to remediate the situation rather than turn it into a bigger problem for yourself or for others. Sometimes helping someone just means being present, and listening to them. Maybe it's not about being some sort of problem solver, but being more kind of somebody who just is there to listen. Sometimes when people aren't ready to do the same things that you've done, if you're like, oh, I know exactly what you need to do to fix your problem, but if that person's not there yet and ready to hear you, they're just gonna, it's just gonna hit a wall. And sometimes you just need to be present and let that other person's issues or whatever they're going through kind of impress on you. And I think that's what is going on with the moon going through Leo right now, is that it's not really about being the center of attention. On some level, it's about being one that can receive more of the story on them, especially now that Mercury and Venus are in the evening star position and the ruler of the moon is in Taurus. It's like that story is really about being more receptive. It's about being a bit more open-minded to what other people are going through, rather than trying to convince people what the right thing to do is. Try to be a bit more about attraction rather than promotion. Lead by example, but of course let go of any results. It's not about making things happen. It's more about, which is interesting because the moon is in Leo, it's more about, how are we responding to the situation? Are we going to make it all about us, or are we going to turn this into a place where we can actually learn something? Because mistakes do happen. And, we always have to check in about whether or not this is really a problem or it's really our problem or not. So I guess it's kind of just easy does it at this point. All right, so that's it for Tuesday. Let's move it forward to Wednesday. So Wednesday, we move into the moon makes that first square to Uranus there. So yeah, just kind of bringing up more of what I was talking about before, reestablishes this fixed sign tension, and how kind of, we have this like potential that we want. We have this ideal and this vision of the future, and yet everything's saying like slow and steady right now. We can't just like make things happen right away. We have to like learn that patience thing. But with Uranus in the mix, it may be that maybe that's the way we've been doing it before, and now it's like getting flipped. It's hard to say. Moon is picking up on it, right? Moon's picking up on whatever's going on in that tension between what I was saying before about this like compliance versus defiance vibration. It's like, okay, usually maybe this way worked before, but maybe now it's not. Now the emphasis, of course, in the story, the focus now is more on this Taurian side of things, maybe keeping things a bit more traditional, keeping things more practical. But that's not really going in accordance with what the status quo is expecting of us. So the moon's really picking up on this. And that might be expressed really in our performativity, or in our the way that we exude our pride, or that we show ourselves to authority figures and to the world, maybe to others outside of ourselves. And it's really maybe about that, like not really getting what we want right now. So if we just kind of stomp our feet on the ground, it may be that we just make the problem bigger, right? But yeah, I mean, it could be what we start seeing some sort of political changes as well on a mundane level. There may be more compromises being made, some solutions, others become calamities, right? So it's kind of like simultaneously possible for conflicts to end, but then also for them to intensify, since the moon's picking up on that tension between Saturn now moving into an exact, it's like right when the moon actually does this square to Uranus, it's like a couple hours later, it makes an exact opposition to Saturn. So there's this kind of push and pull between these two forces here. It could be that like sides are changing, right? And it may be that a crisis is encountered on some level. And because the moon is now in the first quarter square, it's like usually when the moon makes that first quarter square, it's like we reach some sort of crisis, we reach some sort of point where we have to kind of push through, we have to overcome in order to continue on whatever kind of intentions we set during that new moon last week in Aries. So yeah, we have to ask ourselves, is this really all about us? Perhaps during these transits to the fixed sign, especially to to the solid signs, to Leo, for instance, in this case. We have to ask ourselves, is this really about us, about me? You know, perhaps during these transits, we need to start to see how our personal lives reflect in the bigger world. Like, where does the personal become political, and vice versa? We can kind of look at this too, like what happened during the last moon transit to Leo. Now, it wasn't in a square to the sun, so it wasn't that first quarter square, but it really brought up some of the complications that have been that I've been talking about, that have to do with this Uranus-Saturn square. And the last time that the moon was in there, that was actually when the Suez Canal blockage came up, right? So this fixed sign, solid sign tension with Uranus being there is that things we really don't want breaking are getting clogged up, they're getting damaged. And with Saturn in the overcoming square, it's like, okay, Uranus is messing up the things that we don't want to be messed up. And then there's just all this pressure on, get it fixed. You're gonna, you know, like I think the ship is still docked in the Suez Canal. They can't even go anywhere because the canal authorities from Egypt, I think, are even saying like they have to pay like millions and millions of dollars, maybe billions. I can't remember the exact numbers, but at that point, it's so abstract. It's just like, I don't know. It's just crazy. I mean, of course, these are big companies. They make lots of money anyway. So, but maybe this is also kind of showing up in our lives too. Maybe there was a blockage or a cloggage or something that we really needed to work, and it delayed things. It delayed things. It caused problems. And now we have to kind of like clean up the show. And perhaps while the moon is making its way through Leo at this time, it's picking up on that again. All right, so let's move forward. The moon keeps moving, separating from those squares and the opposition, and moves into a nice exact opposition with Jupiter and sextiling Mars. So this is happening when we wake up in the morning. We're picking up on this in the morning. There might be just a greater sense of optimism. Maybe we dealt with the situations that were the tensions and the problems that came up the day before. Maybe we dealt with them in a way that produced some solutions. It may be that the tables turn again. Remember, oppositions sometimes change sides, change the potential. The energy becomes equal power, and so maybe there's a possibility of flipping the coin. And you know, for some of us, if we dealt with this in a way that gave us a greater sense of pride, again, gave us maybe some sense of integrity, you know, being in Leo, it kind of bring us up. And with that opposition to Jupiter, even if we didn't deal with the situation in a way that makes us feel good, there's maybe a bit of hope coming into it. Maybe it flips from a self-centered position to a more unilateral position, being in Aquarius. Maybe it's not about, we flip from being all about us and we start seeing the other side. Maybe we stop being all about the light and we become more about the darkness, more about the receptivity. And that just could be a good thing, could be an empowering thing, could be a potential to see the other side of the situation, have the bigger picture in view. But yeah, I mean, while that's picking up, this is a good energy now to make changes and to adapt to situations that are not working. If we weren't already doing that, now's the chance that we can do that. The energy is there. The energy was building up, and there's a sense of optimism with Jupiter. But then as the day goes on, the moon moves into that exact, just before leaving Leo, gets that one little last kick from Mars to see what can be done, what can be initiated, what can be kind of cut away in order to change and adapt to the situation, to do things differently. So that will happen probably midday. We'll see there's new solutions to the problems. And that coincides with the moon changing signs, another energy shift. The dots are connecting now that the moon is in a trine position to all of those planets back in Taurus. We can kind of see like what the problems meant and what their solutions can be, maybe on more practical levels, more pragmatic levels. So just moving the moon forward here, connecting to those trines, making them exact. So this is really good energy, in fact, to make those to adapt to the things that we learned just before, to the optimism we saw, the bigger picture, seeing that some of the things we can initiate do adapt and change things. Maybe the things that we're having a lot of resistance towards from the solid signs, but now in a fixed, the moon's now in a fixed sign. So there's more of taking those ideas and those inception possibilities, making pragmatic choices, offering suggestions and letting go of results, because things are just moving more smoothly with those trines. So yeah, connecting the dots and using the tools we have with applicable problem solving, rather than conceptualizing things or hoping for the best. Things are kind of falling into place, and this really leads into Friday. So as you can see, the trines really don't go exact until Friday anyway. So now we're in Friday, and that morning, the Venus moves into an exact conjunction with Uranus. So maybe in the middle of the night, there could be things that go on. Venus and Taurus combinations are not always such a big deal, but they can be exciting. Maybe this is a night when we do something pleasurable that's unexpected, but it may not be a comfortable combination. I think, like I said, Uranus is just about breaking things up, emancipating things, and Venus is now in its home sign of Taurus. It wants things to be comfortable, wants things to remain calm, peaceable, workable, taking things in a direction slowly, one step at a time. But Uranus wants change, and Taurus is this sign that's like showing this side of Venus that's kind of actively resisting to change. And this is kind of really going to be leading us up into things moving forward, as well as each of these planets kind of moves into that conjunction with Uranus. And it may look like things that are solid and safe are actually turning out to have a lot more fractures in them than we thought in the first place. Perhaps some of the things that we want to spend our money on, some of the things we want to invest in, some of the creative endeavors that we're indulging in, some of the relationships that we are starting to form. They may from the get-go seem like there's a lot of like safety and security there, or some steadfastness. But then once these planets start to meet up with Uranus, it's like there's no way of knowing what is safe or not, and that idea of safety and that idea of stability kind of gets reworked a little bit. What things that we we realize, like kind of that these are just ideas. They're not absolutes. And so this is a chance to take ourselves out of our comfort zones and to really do something alternative and be inventive in Venus-like ways. So be more inventive with our relationships, be more inventive with the things that we get sensually, sexuality, maybe on our appetites, maybe trying new foods, getting our desires met in different ways. So that's just one of the interesting things about this transit, I think, too, is that we can try something different with things that we've always been doing the same. If we've always been eating the same food on this day for the last X amount of time, maybe it's time to try something different, try something outside of the box, and that this thing has the potential to be very enjoyable, with Venus ruling over this this adherence, this commingling of the planets. Could be like a emancipatory sexual experience, or a taste sensation that completely revolutionizes our taste buds, right? So be inventive about it, be open-minded, because Mercury is also about to conjoin with Uranus. So it is a time to start being more inventive, be more open to the new inventions of the world, be more open-minded with our thinking about how the world actually functions, about our interconnectedness with nature as well. So although risky things, although safe things may become risky, the opposite could happen too, where risky things become safe. So yeah, otherwise that there's just, I think with the moon trining to all those, to that conjunction, as well as all the other planets in Taurus, it's a good day for us to do something, even though it's outside the box, in a fluid manner. But I think really the big thing that we can look at this day is actually at the end of the day. So the moon just kind of moves through, getting ready to make an opposition to Neptune, but Mars changes signs. So now we're on, what were we on, Friday there? Yes. So literally in the afternoon, Mars changes signs. So this is really where the vibe changes, and it's going to kind of define how things go until June, basically. So significant energy shift. Highlight that here. So significant energy shift as Mars moves into Cancer. It's out of Gemini, it's into the cardinal tropical signs. So it's going to be making changes. Mars is also in detriment. It's also in fall or depression in Cancer. So the way that Martian things will be unfolding will be in a way that it's not comfortable with. It's really, actually, it's brought down in a way. It's going to be falling into a lot of pitfalls. You know, Mars in Gemini, while Mars was in Gemini, it was very fast, wanting to like this, now I do this, now I do this, now I do this, now I do this. But in Cancer, it's got to slow down. It's got to slow down. It's got to be more subtle and a lot more emotionally driven. Now the moon is ruling over Mars. The moon is changing signs like every 2 days. So it's going to have to fluctuate. And Mars really doesn't want to do that. Mars doesn't want to fluctuate its emotions. It doesn't want to go up and down and up and down in the way that it does Martian things, like exerting effort, initiating things, doing things really fast. It just wants to go, it wants to be very fast. And somehow in Gemini, that was kind of working because you know, it could just hit one thing and then it can move on really quick. Maybe those things that we were doing didn't have a lot of long-lasting effect, but at least we could feel that there was a flow in the energy of how we initiated things. But now it's in Cancer. It's going to be there till June 11th. And now it won't really like be doing that much, like in terms of harsh aspects to other things. And I'll talk about that in a bit. And what's really kind of going to be nice about this transit is that there's going to be the Scorpio full moon on the 26th of April, and it will be trining that. And then Jupiter moves into Pisces in May, and then it's going to be trine with Mars. So there could be something really interesting going on there. But Mars in general doesn't like to be in Cancer. It just gives too many fucks right now, cares way too much. And while in Capricorn, for instance, where it's exalted, you know, that Capricorn Saturnian vibe is going to really shape Mars and take it to initiate and take actions, new missions that it can see all the way through. While in Cancer, it's like, it doesn't even know where to start. And so it can just be a bit too necessity driven right now. And that may like provoke us to kind of like maybe even run away from problems rather than deal with them. Mars wants to fight, and the moon, Cancer, wants to be defensive. So how can we kind of like work with that rather than just be frustrated completely? Because Mars is frustrated in Cancer. And so it really, it's not about being so direct with our actions or expecting them to always follow through. Again, it's moving, like what's interesting is like Mars moving into Cancer is picking up on all the things I was saying before about all the inferior planets moving into more receptive positions. So they became evening stars, but also a more receptive sign, Taurus. So we're in a more receptive season right now. It's not about being initiatory and putting ourselves out there and making big impacts. It's more about being a bit more open-ended on things. So not necessarily being like passive in terms of like passive aggressive, but being a bit more how we can learn greater self-acceptance at this time. You know, what are we capable of doing and what are we not? Learning how to be more honest with ourselves and others. You know, it's just like coming up to those times when we're just going to be walking into pitfalls, and we can either like learn from our mistakes and our insecurities, or we can just kind of snowball them into bigger problems. So there may just not be the same kind of access to resources we're used to having to directly combat some of the problems in our lives. So it's not really about taking action to protect. Sorry, it's not really about taking action to like, you know, strike. You know, Mars is the god of war. So if we use like war references in terms, it's like, this is not the time to full-blown march into battle, make a big attack. This is more about building up our defenses, building up our structures of defense and security right now. What can we work on now in order to maintain security for the future as well? So yeah, there just may not be the same access to those resources we're used to for tackling problems that usually would make sense to us. So we can kind of start to take more steps towards protecting our resources as well. Mars, what's really great about this transit, and compared to the last time Mars was in Cancer, which was in 2019, May to June 2019, which I'll talk about in a bit. What's really great is that unlike that time when Mars would have been opposite Saturn and Pluto, now it's only opposite Pluto. Sure, that's like kind of scary in a lot of ways, but it's really a lot less intense. It's a way less weight and gravity. It's a lot less heavy-handed. And Mars is an aversion to Saturn. So it's almost like, you know, the two big troublemakers of the cosmos. They're not dealing with each other. They're not even like seeing each other. They're not even, maybe they're not collaborating. They're not doing anything together. They don't even know where each other is. And this is like maybe kind of a break for a lot of us. Now, just to talk a little bit about some of the things that happened last time Mars was in Cancer, you know, this was a time when, this is just examples of some of the kind of Mars-like things that may have come up during that time. So for instance, Russia passed a sovereign internet bill, which kind of, it was quite controversial at the time, especially if you know a lot about tech, but basically it kind of steered Russian trades away from foreign servers. This is also the time when the second most major Ebola breakout in history came out in the Congo. Tensions between US and China escalated when the US tariff hike was implemented at that time, if anyone remembers that. So maybe things not as serious as that happens, but while Mars is in Cancer, it's just like, you know, injuries and accidents and problems are more easy to fall into. There was a number of, but at the same time, like I said, there was a possibility to spend our action-based resources on things that were more about preparing for the future. So at that time, there was also a number of international state leaders meeting in private to try and work out some of the problems. Now, last time that also happened was this was when the Hong Kong protests began, and this went on for a whole year. I mean, there's still tensions there. So, you know, this is a time when things could become more problem making, but at the same time, more solution based in different ways. For instance, that was when, at the time, the US President Trump was the first US president to go to North Korea, and they started talking about denuclearization negotiations. Who knows how successful that was, but these were the kinds of things that went on. It's a bit more subtle, it's a bit more under the radar, some of the Martian tendencies. So that's kind of the big thing going on this week. Now, when we move forward into Saturday, let's go forward here. Oops. So how far did I go? Yeah. So middle of the night, Moon makes an opposition to Neptune. This may just be culminating some of the dreamlike fantasy illusions that we've been picking up on since the last conjunction, and that square that went on, when was it? It was like the other day on the 21st. So it may be that, maybe some of the dreams we were having, now they're kind of like peaking on some level, or they're flipping from something that was dreamlike into something more realistic, especially with the moon making a nice trine to its ruler Mercury. There's a chance for these kinds of illusions that we're having, delusions about our lives, about the world, that we can kind of take the rose-colored glasses off and see it more realistically. So that's kind of what the moon's picking up on when we wake up. And then not long after that, Mercury moves into the exact conjunction with Uranus. So even though things might be a bit confusing when we wake up in the morning from the moon picking up on that Neptune transit, this Mercury-Uranus conjunction could result in things that are unexpected to a lot of Mercury significations, maybe communication breakdowns, some of the things that we're learning, we're not really seeing the point in them, maybe technology mishaps. It's hard to say. I mean, it could be the reverse. It could be like usually things are never working and now they're working all of a sudden. Markets may go up and down. Things that we depend on in the market, and also travel and things like that. Maybe there might be some mishaps that go on like that, or just flipping of the coin, some sort of sudden, unexpected change. So yeah. And then as we go through the day, the moon does pick up again on some of those Pluto and Capricorn things. Maybe there's a bit more relief coming from some of the domestic violence tensions that have been going on. But let's see, some results are found, or there's just some extra relief from that. Right now in the US, there's also all this new talk in the government about gun laws and things like that. And this is not a new conversation, but maybe for the first time, there's some possibility for change in the way that domestic violence is in our lives and on the news. But then the moon changes signs in the evening. And this is actually the first difficult aspect that will come to Mars while Mars is in Cancer. So now that Mars is in this moon-ruled sign, the moon is kind of like, all right, I want things to be more civil and fair and peaceable and just want to like get things more compromised and even tempered. And now it's in the square with Mars, and Mars is just like not comfortable there. If this is about some of those gun tensions in the US, or gun tensions in general, or violent or war or aggression tensions in general in the world, maybe there was that like possibility for things to calm down a bit. But now it's like, what we're all feeling on a personal level with the moon now in Libra is like, we just want things to calm down. But then there's this like the maverick of the cosmos is in this lunar sign, and it's like being kind of like, I really don't want to be peaceable right now, and so they're just kind of getting off on the wrong foot. So that may kind of influence things moving into the evening, and for in other hemispheres, depending on where you are, it may influence how things move forward. So the moon's going to be picking up on that as it goes through Libra. So going to just move on to Sunday here. Now, let's go back a bit here. Venus is going to perfect that exact square with Saturn. So some of the tensions that were being picked up on are now being re-emphasized again. Those tensions between, peaceability and revolutionary, and kind of defiance versus compliance. But Venus and Saturn are both dignified. So that's a big difference. Venus is in Taurus, rules over Taurus. Saturn's in Aquarius, rules over Aquarius. So they're both in positions where they're able to get the things they need in order to do the things they want to do. If Venus wants to bring more harmony, it has all the resources it needs to do that. If Saturn wants to have more control, it has the resources to do that. So there may be, even though there's tension building between them, there's also this potential for things to change in productive ways. Saturn's also in the superior position between them. So this could be good, but it will require work. It's like we're gonna see kind of what the possibilities of our desires being met looks like, but there's a lot of work and responsibility involved in that. So you can kind of think about it like having kids. It's like having kids comes with a lot of rewards, but it also includes like a mountain of responsibility. So, our relationships are changing right now after this transit to Uranus, but things are getting more serious. Saturn is like now starting to square with later in today, Saturn's also going to square with Mercury. So just things are just getting more serious in general. And they're becoming more refined. Our thinking's becoming more refined. Our relationships are becoming more refined. Our investments, our values are becoming more defined. And it's like, how can we enjoy things within the boundaries, within the confines of our lives at this moment? Maybe they're from the confines that we're inflicting, that the world's inflicting, but in general, there's like a methodology being formed. Saturn's saying we got to have method to our chaos right now. And it's almost like its kind of impression on these other planets, even though it's a tense building one, it's like we understand the seriousness and we know that it's maybe good for us on some level. So it does not mean that we're going to just enjoy everything all at once, but it's more of like Saturn saying, okay, we got to slow burn this one. We got to slow burn these vibes. So it may be a time when like we got to agree to disagree, but somehow agreeing to disagree is like better than being on the same page. It's not really sure. I'm not really sure about that one, but let's see. So just pay attention though, in general, what goes on here, because this is going to be related to when planets all go into Leo later in July and August, when they're all going to be in opposition to Saturn. So this is going to bring up that same kind of whatever's going on at this time on the 24th on Saturday will be kind of brought up again later in the summer. So yeah, Mercury squaring with Saturn. This could mean that there's just like there's hard conversations that need to be had. It's not really, these are things that are really not going to be easy to communicate, especially being in fixed signs. It's like these are the things we just want to stay the same. But with a square, squares are all about forcing change or making the potential for change, overcoming that sort of things that are in our way. We got to start to have those conversations about where we're at and the plan and the future. So some things are just super serious right now, and we just need to talk about them, whether or not we want to or not. If we don't talk about them, things never change, but things are changing regardless of if we want them to or not. So we can be a part of the solution or part of the problem. That is up to us entirely, individually. There's going to be serious news, serious changes, serious things about travel. It could be like a bit of the bad before some of the good that happens tomorrow, because Mercury is about to, as you can see here, Mercury is adhering to a conjunction with Venus. So as it adheres to this exact conjunction with Venus, it's also squaring with Saturn. So let me just move that forward. Yeah, moves into that square, is in adherence. So Mercury's being bonified by a highly dignified Venus. So even though these are like challenging conversations that we're having, it's kind of like the bad before the good, or like the dark. It's like the dark night before the calm morning. And this is happening in the middle of the night too. So perhaps this is like difficult conversations that happen in the middle of the night that keep us up all night, sort of thing. Or maybe it's just difficult thinking. We're overthinking the situation because we know it's really serious and we can't get to sleep, even though we're really comfortable where we're at. Like it's like just a very comfortable situation that we're in, even though things are serious. So Mercury is under Venus's influence too. So maybe the deals that we're wanting to get out of those things, they're more Venetian styles of things. But Saturn is reminding us about this bigger picture and the seriousness of the world right now. So it's kind of this tension between the gravity of the situation versus the way that we're figuring out the desires that we want to be met. So that's it for this week. Moving into the next day, just to talk about it a little bit, there's going to be like I said, Mercury is going to conjoin with Venus. Saturn is still squaring with Mercury and Venus. So there is this seriousness about the responsibilities and things like that. But in general, we're going to be figuring out new ways, we're going to be figuring out ways to get the things that we enjoy, or we're going to be doing things different to deal with the things that are hard. Not really hesitating as things come up, as long as they are in accordance to our nature. But basically, there could be a time when a deal comes into play, and maybe we have to take that deal. It's not really time to think about it. It's time to go with what we want and be trusting with what we want. Have our priorities straight. All right, so I'm going to take down this share here. So that's it for this week. I hope that this helped you guys in whatever way. And thanks again always for tuning in, liking, commenting, subscribing, and all that stuff. If you want to get consultation with me, please hit the links below. I hope everybody's doing okay out there. And thanks always for tuning in. And I'll see you guys next week. Peace.